Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to
G'day.
Theology Thursday. We're back, and as you know, for the last couple of months, we've been looking at John's first epistle. So, as you know, the Apostle John wrote the Gospel of John, the big one. He wrote the book of Revelation, but he also wrote these three, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John. And this is the biggest one. It's 4 chapters long, or is it 5? That's four. So, yeah, there you go. Let's hope it is, because you'll all check now and see. There's so many books in the Bible. Anyway, we're in chapter 2. The last couple of verses of chapter 2 we're kind of stuck on because there's so much in it.
There is.
And we've been doing these last couple of verses, well, verse 3, 15, 16, 17, so the last three verses, for the last few weeks. But we've got more. There's more in it. Dave, why don't you read it again?
Just these couple of verses.
Okay, so the last few
Everything
verses.
that the world offers, the craving to satisfy fleshly desires,
Right.
so there's one craving. The chasing after the things that you see and want to have, number 2. And the pride that comes with any success in life, number 3.
Right.
None of these things come from the Father. It's all from the world. The world and all of the desires that it creates will eventually disappear, but anyone who obeys God will live forever.
That's a big statement.
It's
None of
huge.
these things come from God.
It's huge.
None of that is a big deal.
So last time we started to look at the three groups of things that cause believers to fall in their walk with God. They're walking in the light, but they're lured into the path of the dark, the traps that the enemy has set.
Yeah, it's called temptation, right?
Yeah, well, these are sometimes known as the big three, actually. You know, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. They're often the things that are set up as the big three. These three areas are actually exactly what Satan used when he tried to tempt Jesus.
Right. So you've got the lust of the flesh, which is things that our body desires naturally, like food. We mentioned food last time, or sexual desire. These are things that are natural desires of the flesh. Then things that you might see that you wouldn't have otherwise thought of, but you see. That's the second category. And the third, the big one. Some would say, I mean, remember the seven deadly sins.
Yeah.
The biggest deadly sin, according to the Catholics, was pride. Pride is the big one, and that's the pride of life.
So in Matthew 4, Jesus has just been baptized, and he's led by the Spirit into the wilderness. And there he fasts and prays for 40 days. And at the end of 40 days, the Bible tells us, in what I consider to be one of the classic understatements of the Bible, that after 40 days fasting, Jesus was hungry.
Jesus was peckish. Jesus felt like a nibble to eat.
Yes. So he's hungry. And Satan comes to him and tempts him to turn the stones into bread to satisfy his hunger. Now, here Satan has found what he thinks is a weakness. Jesus was hungry. And some of those rounded stones,
they could have looked like loaves of bread, right?
Absolutely.
Change the colour a little bit, a little bit of, that might have looked
and
a bit
the
like
flesh
crusty.
that's craving for food after 40 days fasting. He would have loved to have picked up one of those loaves of bread to fill his need, to satisfy his human fleshly desires. But of course, bread was not really the issue here. If Jesus had come to this human temptation and exercised his divine prerogative and turned the stones into bread, he would have failed in his mission to live purely as a man, to entirely empty himself of the divine prerogative and face life in the same way that you and I and any other human being has to face it.
So it was really a temptation for him to cheat.
Absolutely.
You know, say, you're God, just turn it into bread. You could do that, you know, and we know he could, right? I mean, Moses, he provided bread. You know, God provided bread for them in the wilderness, and Jesus said, I'm the bread that came from heaven. So there is a real temptation for Jesus. He's looking around, nobody's watching. I've done the fast 40 days. It's not like I've cheated there. I could just quickly have a nibble to eat. But that was
the temptation.
The temptation was, but don't be a real human.
No, but of course we know that Jesus replied, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. It's interesting, I think it is anyway, to note here how Jesus deals with his natural physical desire, his need for food. He doesn't allow his physical desire, his physical need to dictate what he will do. Instead, he makes his purpose, his calling, he makes that rule over his fleshly desire. In other words, he rules over his desires. He doesn't allow them to rule over him.
And we made that point loudly last week when we were talking about, our fleshly desires, that they are natural, like the desire to eat. They are great servants, terrible masters.
Yes.
You see this with that one example, food. When food becomes your master, people eat too much, or they eat the wrong thing. Maybe they have a craving for sugar and they just eat sugary stuff all the time and they become overweight, or they might have a craving for any number of things that when food becomes your master and it controls you, it can ruin your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is a good servant. We must eat, but it's a terrible master.
Yeah. So the next thing that Satan tried with Jesus was the pride of life. So he takes Jesus up to the pinnacle of the temple and tempts him to reveal his true identity to everyone. Throw yourself off the temple, off the top of the temple, and show everyone that the Father will send his angels to protect you. Reveal, in other words, what he was saying, reveal who you are before God's appointed time.
Yeah.
And Satan wants Jesus to try and take hold of his identity, but outside of the Father's purpose and plan for him.
Yeah.
And he was saying to Jesus, in effect, look, establish your own worth and value. Do it on your terms rather than on the Father's terms. And Jesus says, hey, you don't put the Lord your God to the test. So this temptation to rise in your public image is to be, you want to be seen and admired, and maybe it's what C.S. Lewis was referring to when he referred to the sweet poison of the false infinite, the sweet poison.
Yeah.
It looks
You
great,
think,
but it's going to kill you.
It is going to kill you, yeah.
It looks eternal. It looks as though it will last, but it will end. It will pass away.
It's interesting that you noted that, Dave, that this temptation matches in with the pride of life category, because when you think about it, throwing yourself off the temple. Now you got to understand there were tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of people in Jerusalem, and this is as close as you get to like viral social media, right? If you were standing at the top, this would go everywhere. Of course, they didn't have social media or television or anything, but this is the same sort of thing. What people will do to get a bit of attention, to get attention on themselves and to elevate themselves is incredible. And Jesus, this was the temptation that Jesus had: elevate yourself. Because then, can you imagine all these people seeing it? Everybody will worship you. Everybody will think you're amazing. They'll all realize who you really are. And once you're floating above the ground, it'll be amazing. You should do it. But it's like you said, sweet poison. Don't do it. Don't do it. It'll kill you in the end.
The only well done that really matters is the one that's directed to us by the Father in the eternal kingdom, when he says, well done, good and faithful servant. That's the only one that really matters. So Jesus' final temptation shows Satan taking him out and letting him see all the kingdoms of the world and their beauty and their glory. Take a look, see for yourself, he says. See their magnificence, see how they look, and imagine yourself owning them. He tempts Jesus by saying, all of this can be yours if you'll just fall down and worship me. But remember the words that Jesus spoke later: gaining the whole world and losing your soul is a very poor exchange.
It's a high price to pay.
Oh, it's the worst. And Jesus replies that it's written that you will worship the Lord your God and serve him only.
Right.
For not that Satan's tactics when he tempted Jesus were new, because they weren't. It was exactly the same as the approach that he took to Eve in the Garden of Eden back in Genesis. He made sure that she saw that the fruit was good, something that pleased her physical appetite, and saw that it was pleasing to the eye. It wasn't just edible, but it has captivating quality that drew Eve's attention and desire. It appealed to her senses and her desire for something more, something beyond that which God had provided. The fruit, in its visual appeal, becomes a symbol of temptation, desire, and the allure of disobedience. It represents the human tendency to prioritize personal desire and perceived benefits over the guidance of God, divine
And the
guidance.
will of, absolutely.
Yeah.
The question, I suppose, then for us, which was the question that Satan's posing here to Jesus, is, what would you put above God?
Yeah.
What, we've all heard those stories about, rock and roll, musicians or heavy metal musicians who sell their soul to the devil, and you've heard those sorts of stories where people are willing to sell their soul in order to become successful.
Yep.
And they become millionaires and very famous and all of that, but the cost is their soul, right? And it's easy to say, I would never do that, or would you? This is the question. It's a lot more subtle. That's an obvious and extreme example, a musician selling his soul to the devil in order to be famous.
And that was the thing with Eve. She knew that if she ate this fruit, it would enhance her knowledge, make her wise. In other words, it appealed to her ego. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's the temptation that each one of us will face sooner or later. What are you willing to do in order, what is more important to you than God? Maybe it's money. Is money more important to you than God? What would you do? How far are you willing to go to get that money? How far are you willing to go to get the fame, the celebrity, to become an influencer on YouTube or on, Instagram? What are people willing to do in order to get what they want? What are you willing to do in order to get your wife or husband of the future, or a boyfriend or girlfriend?
And that's the reason Satan uses these three areas, because he knows that temptations like these are hard to handle. He makes them seem like a good thing, maybe a gift, even part of God's plan, but it's a hoax.
Right.
It's a deception.
And here's Jesus saying, you know what, no deal.
Yeah.
Nothing. Commandment number 1, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not worship any other gods. That is number 1 for me. I don't care what it costs me. That's my number 1. I don't care what you throw at me. I will not give up that. God is number 1.
So these temptations brought Eve down, but they didn't bring Jesus down because he stood on the word. They certainly worked with plenty of others down through the ages, though. So you can be sure that the devil is unlikely to change his tactic that has worked so well for such a long time.
Yeah.
You can guarantee that you and I will face temptations in all of these three areas.
100%.
And that's why John urges his readers to walk in the light, to keep out of the shadows, keep away from darkness, because the things that the devil uses to tempt you are opposed to God's plan for your life. They are not from the Father.
And it'll fool you. I mean, you won't see it coming. That's the danger behind Satan's temptations is, it doesn't, it looks good. It sounds like a good idea at the time, but if it contravenes that number 1 thing, God must be number 1. If it contravenes that, don't go near it. Trust me, don't do it. It'll end badly. This will end in tears. So, something's going to go wrong.
So we've got these big three, the big three.
Right.
And last time we focused on one of them. And the second category, second one of those three, that John notes, is chasing after the things that you see and want to have.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
The way I translate it, the lust of the eyes will lead to trouble. It's just like the first one that we looked at last time. This chasing after the things that you see and want to have is simply wanting the things that you see, those insatiable desires that are triggered by by sight, triggered by what a person sees.
Right.
It's the seductive
Right.
lure of things that are not from God.
So this is a little different to the lust of the flesh, or the things that your body would crave naturally anyway, like eating too much food, your
This is
body's
not the
hungry.
natural stuff.
This is stuff that you might not have been tempted with unless you'd seen it.
Yep.
You didn't even know you wanted it until you saw it.
Yep.
And then once you saw it, you went, oh, I want that.
It's in the 10th commandment, we find some examples of what it might
Yeah.
be like. Things like, don't covet, he says, your neighbour's wife, his male servant, his female servant, his ox, his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbour. This coveting or yearning to possess money or other possessions or physical things, that doesn't come from God.
Yeah, how many times
It's
do
from
you
the
think
world around us.
you say, people say, oh, I just love my car. I love my car, and then they hop in someone else's car that's nicer, and they go, oh, I want this one now, Or they really love where they live, and then they go to somebody's mansion and go, oh, I want this one, It's the lust of the eyes.
Yep. John emphasises that these physical things simply don't last. They will pass away. And in contrast, the child of God is guaranteed eternity. We find in 2 Samuel, in chapter 11, that it was this failure that led to the great sin of King David when he saw Bathsheba in the tub and wanted her for himself. David found that his eyes saw, and because his eyes saw, then his heart wanted, and in order to satisfy the craving of fleshly desires, he committed both adultery and murder.
Right.
And he disqualified himself from building the temple that God actually had wanted him to build.
Right.
So being tempted to covet or to long for something that somebody else has is a temptation that is no respecter of persons. In fact, it's often the sin of the rich and powerful just as much as it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you've got yourself a yacht, but now you want a super yacht.
Yep.
Like poor people it doesn't even occur to us, to think that way.
In the age in which we live, the world is full of eye candy, the glamour and the gaudiness almost. Materialism.
Dave, I'm mildly impressed that you know that phrase, eye candy. Good on you, Dave. He's really with it, isn't he?
Materialism beckons with its promise of happiness and fulfillment. A media-saturated society just bombards us constantly with advertising campaigns, both on public and social media, that effectively say to us all the time, covet this,
you want this,
covet this, leading to this needing the thing that I don't actually need syndrome.
I didn't even know I needed that until now. Now that I've seen it, I really want that, right?
And of course, one of the saddest manifestations of this particular insatiable desire is our response to the material well-being of close friends, so it may be siblings, even your aunt, your uncle, your parents, your grandparents, your neighbour, whatever. They get blessed materially, and they get things that you can see.
Right.
And what's your first response?
I want that too.
Why them? Why not me? I want that. I want that.
Yeah.
And typically, and very often, and sadly, that's the first response that we have when we see somebody really blessed.
Really, yeah.
But all that glitters isn't gold, and the child of God knows that fame and fortune and all that goes with such things will quickly fade.
Dave, I saw a documentary years ago. It's a long one. It's by a guy called Anthony Bourdain, I believe, and it was called Status Anxiety. And he said, he noted, so he tracks back from sociologists for the last 300 years. And he said he noticed that even in the early days, they looked at people in Europe and people in the United States who had a similar sort of standard of living, but the people in the United States had much higher, what he calls, status anxiety. They would see what everybody else had, and they would want that too. Whereas in Europe, they didn't have that. And he said the difference was which is what they the conclusion they come to, is that in Europe, they still had, the lords of the manor, and they had, this almost caste system where people who were peasants and didn't have much, they were so far removed from the people who did have a lot that they could never afford to, have that ambition. They would never look at it and go, oh, well, they just go, oh, well, he rides a gold carriage. He's the lord of the manor, good on him. Here am I in my little mud hut. Whereas over in America, they'd been told, hey, we all start at the same level. Anyone can be president. And that started to create status anxiety.
Yep.
And there's no other, there's probably no greater environment for status anxiety than a high school reunion. People because they realize we were all once the same.
Yeah.
We all started the same. And here we are 30 years later, 40 years later, and you're doing better than me. And so they get this anxiety because I didn't do as well as that person, and I want what that person's got, but I didn't do it. And it's a really fascinating documentary. Like I said, it's quite a long one. It's about 3 hours long. In fact, I think, there's 3 parts to it. But well worth a look at it, because it speaks to this lust of the eyes. I bought myself a new Toyota, and I'm loving it. And then I look next door, and he's got a BMW. And I go, oh, the lust of the eyes. I want that. Yeah. And we get this status anxiety, and it's not from God. It is not from the Father. Like you just said, it's all going to burn. It's not eternal. You can't take it with you.
Our focus should not be the newest product or the latest fashion. Our goal is not to keep up with the Joneses. It's to keep following Jesus.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, that's the important thing. Anyone who has ever tried building a house of cards will understand. You're very careful on that table. You don't want anybody. It's very hard and frustrating. Right. You don't want anyone to touch that table, because the slightest bump on the table or the slightest breeze, if somebody opens the door too quickly, the whole house collapses.
Right.
And what John is saying here is that building your life on the world is just like that.
Yeah.
It's destined to fall apart. It's going to pass. The world and all its desires are going to fade and pass away.
Right.
Like a sandcastle on the beach, just waiting for the next wave to come in and wash it away.
Yeah.
It's destined to fade. It's destined to disappoint. Solomon taught about the same thing in the book of Ecclesiastes. He had tried to satisfy all of these fleshly desires. He had the finest food, a magnificent home, more women than you could count, more money than you could even imagine, leisure and comfort in abundance. And when it came to power, he was king. He sought to satisfy everything that the heart imagined. He built forests, he held huge parties, had the best of clothing. He was well educated, he was wise, he had great prosperity. You could say he lived life to the fullest.
Yeah.
But in the end, he said, it's all vanity. It's like trying to catch the wind.
Yeah.
So maybe that the old songwriter got the point pretty well that John was making when he wrote, only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for God will last.
Amen. Amen. Well, that's given us a lot to think about. So God bless you this week. Have a good think about that. Maybe pray about it and say, God, is there anything, is there the lust of my flesh or the lust of my eyes or the pride of life? Is there something there that I need to just tidy up and get right with God? Make sure He is number one. Build your life on Him and Him alone, because that's all that lasts for eternity. God bless you and have a wonderful week.